Hey everyone, I'm the pro wrestling VTuber dedicated to love and justice, Hit Saberfang, and I'd like to thank everyone who's helped make my beginner's guide to Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling video my most watched on the channel to date. I've gotten so many kind and thoughtful responses to it, and my favorites have been those telling me about how it's thanks to that video that they even discovered Tokyo Joshi Pro in the first place. It's such a special promotion, and I'm so happy to know that I've helped even more people experience that joy for themselves. I even wound up meeting someone at a local wrestling show who brought up the video after I mentioned TJPW, like,
oh yeah, and I was just watching this VTuber talk all about that.
And I got to be like, that's me. I'm VTuber. When I put the beginner's guide video together, I did my best to future-proof it as much as possible, but with so much happening within TJPW, I thought it'd be fun to try and do some regular update videos where we can talk about TJ and help catch those up who are still hopping on board. Today I'll be giving y'all the current happenings within TJPW, including its current championship landscape, roster and staff changes, website and social media updates, as well as the latest pop offerings from the UPUP Girls. Afterwards, stick around where I'll be answering your burning TJPW and Japanese wrestling related questions in a Q&A fielded across comments from the original video and Bluesky. But first, breaking news! Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling is returning to the US this July with an unprecedented 3-day tour in the Lone Star State of Texas. TJPW Texas Tour kicks off in Houston with back-to-back dates starting Thursday, July 10th and continuing on Friday, July 11th, with both events taking place at downtown's Post Houston. The action continues over in Dallas for its final stop on Sunday, July 13th at Forney's OC Theater, meaning that if you're in town that weekend for All Elite Wrestling's Y'all-In event at Globe Life Field, you've got an opportunity to make it a non-stop weekend of wrestling with the stars of TJPW. This is the first time TJPW has embarked on this kind of multi-day tour in the US, and it's an incredibly rare opportunity to see the stars of Tokyo Joshi Pro live and in action. Plenty of talent has already been announced for this tour, including all of TJPW's current champions, Mizuki, Suzume, Shoko Nakajima, and Hyper Misao. Joining them will be Miyu Yamashita, Maki Ito, Yuki Arai, Pam Harajuku, Arisu Endo, Yuki Kamafuku, and Moka Miyamoto. And appearing exclusively in Dallas, All Elite Wrestling's Yuka Sakazaki. And wouldn't be an authentic TJPW experience without the UPUP Girls. Miyu Watanabe, Raku, and Shino Suzuki are scheduled to appear as well, and will be getting the party started with their pre-show concert corner. For more information on TJPW Texas Tour, including how to purchase tickets, please visit TokyoStoryUSA.com and be sure to use the offer code KITTJPW15OFF for 15% off all ticket purchases. Thank you so much to the organizers at Tokyo Story, a Houston-based hobby store bringing niche pop culture from Japan, for hooking the Saber Gang up with this offer. And now, let's get back to the video. Alright, since I uploaded the beginner's guide video about 5 months ago, there's been plenty of movement within the company, so let's start our updates with the title and roster changes. When we last left off, we were in the middle of the long-awaited Princess of Princess Championship run of the UPUP Girls Miyu Watanabe, having defeated Miyu Yamashita for the title back at Grand Princess 2-4. In her first run with the belt, she put up some impressive victories, toppling 3 of the 4 pillars in Yamashita, Shoko Nakajima, and tag team partner Rika Tatsumi. However, it was the honorary pillar of TJPW, the most viral wrestler on the planet, Mizuki, who ultimately ended Watanabe's 279-day reign with an outstanding main event performance at TJPW's annual January 4th Itaewon event, claiming her second Princess of Princess Championship. Since then, Mizupyeon has successfully defended the Princess of Princess Championship twice, first at the main event of TJPW's Grand Princess 2-5 event against Rika Tatsumi in a singles match 8 years in the making. Seriously, I have no idea how they managed to keep those two apart for so long. And in her second defense at TJPW's Mania weekend show in Las Vegas, Mizuki successfully claimed revenge against the woman who ended her first run with TJPW's top prize, the ace, Miyu Yamashita. Having toppled both a seemingly unstoppable Miyu Watanabe and following it up with a very convincing win against Yamashita in Vegas, the Popping Sugar Rabbit is looking OP as hell going into the next year of competition. When we last left the International Princess Championship, it was around the waist of one of TJPW's most popular competitors, the now former SKE48 group member, Yuki Arai, in what ultimately went down as a record-setting 366-day run with the cerulean strap. However, it was a fellow class of 98 member Suzume who relieved Arai of her International Princess title, defeating her at TJPW's annual January 4th event, just like Mizuki. Also, for those who may not be aware, TJPW's class of 98 is the unofficial pairing of Suzume, Yuki Arai, Arisu Endo, and Moka Miyamoto, all of whom were born in the year 1998. The more you know. Suzume's been a bit busier with her reign, having already racked up 4 successful defenses since snagging the title in January. 2 of these defenses were against one of my personal faves from the US independents, Jada Stone, who I'd been wanting to see in TJPW basically since the first time I ever saw her wrestle. And she's been killing it for Tej. Great matches, strong reception, and they're already bringing her back for her 3rd overseas trip in 5 months. We'd love to see it. Let's fucking get it, Jada. Our final titles to check in on, the Princess Tag Team Championship, is finally in the possession of fan favorites Hyper Misao and Shoko Nakajima, Kuraku Kiyome. Having entered and falling short in all 4 previous Max Heart tournaments within TJPW, the 5th time was the charm, with the pair finally winning the annual tag team competition by defeating Pom Harajuku and Max the Impaler in the finals. This set them up for a date with destiny against the team that blocked them from the titles last year, 1-2 Million, the team of Maki Ito and Miyu Yamashita, at TJPW's Grand Princess event back in March, defeating them in one of the most thrilling and emotional matches in pro wrestling this year. Since then, a series of unfortunate injuries has been plaguing Hyper Misao, but that hasn't stopped the pair from making 2 successful defenses, one of which was against a pair of Southeast Asia wrestling stars, Alexis Lee of Singapore and Thailand's Matcha. There's been a number of changes in the TJPW roster since last December, so let's start with the recent additions to the cast. Surprise debuting a whole 3 weeks after I published the original Beginner's Guide video, Mifu Ashita made their TJPW debut on January 4th in a losing effort with Himawari against the team of Chikananase and Toga. Thank you, Mifu! Mifu comes to us by way of Ice Ribbon, where she was trained within his dojo system and was an international ribbon tag team champion alongside partner Kiori, a title she claimed within her first year as a pro wrestler. Mifu is still a relative rookie, having debuted in August 2023, and with less than 100 matches to her name so far. What she may lack in experience, however, she makes up for in sheer unbridled charisma, and has been another exciting and a welcome addition to the growing roster. And it's a roster that continues to grow in 2025 as we get ready to welcome TJPW's latest trainee, Ren Konatsu, who will be making her debut at the June 1st Spring Tour show in Nagoya, which, as of this recording, is today. Actually, she debuts today. Ren was originally introduced to TJPW fans back in October 2024, and the debut will hold special meaning for the 23-year-old rookie. The Trinichi Hall venue in Nagoya is close to her hometown of Hamamatsu City in Shizuoka, and her opponent on this day, Suzume, is the wrestler who originally inspired her to get in the ring. Nothing like getting beat up by your hero to kickstart your pro wrestling career. Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling may have gained 2 wrestlers, but they'll also be losing one as well, as we sadly prepare to say farewell to recent TJPW signee Yoshiko Hasegawa, aka Yoppy. At a March 27th press conference, Hasegawa announced that she'll be retiring from pro wrestling this year at a TJPW event on July 8th. Yoppy joined the Tokyo Joshi Pro roster in September 2024 after making regular appearances as a freelancer. Originally debuting for Actress Girls in 2019, she'd nearly retired once before in 2021 after suffering a cervical spine injury as well as a neck fracture. Yoppy would overcome these injuries and return to wrestling in 2022 as part of Gambare Pro, where she'd also start making appearances for TJPW, debuting at Wrestle Princess 3 alongside TJPW and Gambare veteran Yuna Manase, as well as former Actress Girl, the recently retired Nao Kakuta. That one still hurts, y'all, I'm not gonna lie. In her retirement announcement, she discussed how she nearly retired a second time after leaving Gambare Pro in 2024, but it was Cyberfight EVP Sanshiro Tagaki who encouraged her to continue wrestling, offering her a spot on the TJPW roster. She cites the recent retirements of her wrestling contemporaries such as Saki Akai and the previously mentioned Nao Kakuta, The Pain Never Goes Away, as her inspirations for wanting to get out in a similarly young and healthy fashion and on her own terms. And for someone who's been through as serious of injuries as Yoppy, you can't blame her for wanting to step away from the ring while she can still do it with her health. I wish Yoppy all the best in her new life and looking forward to cheering her on until the very end, where I will no doubt be left a blubbering, crying mess. Joshi retirements fuck me up, man. Like they're like weird upside down funerals or something. It eats me up inside. And I hate seeing all my favorites crying and looking miserable, because then that makes me cry and then I feel miserable, and it's a bad time. It's awful. Okay, let's move on to the next update. Let's keep in mind that TJPW is the happiest promotion in the world, so surely nothing else will be as profoundly upsetting as Oh, well, that's not distressing at all. Yes, my friends, no matter how much I try and disassociate whenever confronted with this truth, it can no longer be denied. The unfortunate reality is that after 8 years as Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling's full-time ring announcer, the GOAT, Sayuri Namba, will be graduating from the promotion on June 22nd at KFC Hall. Namba originally debuted for Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling after winning a televised contest by DDT Pro to find a new women's pro wrestling announcer. And by win, I mean she was actually the only applicant after about 2 weeks of promoting the contest. Her job interview was broadcast live on DDT's Thursday the Night program on Abema TV, where she stunned the panel with her honest, straightforward answers. Namba had revealed that she was part of an underground idol group where she was ultimately fired for being caught drinking while underage and having a boyfriend. All of which are big no-nos for idols. Having impressed the DDT panel with her badass Rebel Idol background, Namba would land the gig and make her debut as TJPW's new ring announcer on May 3rd, 2018. Coincidentally, this show also featured the in-ring debut of the company's previous ring announcer, the Burning Venus, Yuki Aino, who of course still wrestles for Tokyo Joshi Pro to this day. Finding a suitable replacement for the likes of Sayuri Namba is no easy task, which is why Namba recently recruited the UPUP GIRLS Shino Suzuki to assist her on an expedition to find one such rare talent. Following a daring adventure during which Shino is bitten by an actual real-life snake, the pair discover Rise Shirai, a promising young announcer who is looking to fulfill the role. Sayuri Namba refuses to accept her as TJPW's new ring announcer unless she can best her in a rap battle, and proceeds to get completely ethered by the young upstart.
Take your リングの外から声上げるガールルール知らんけど夢よしビビコスチューム着てマイク持ってさスポットライト浴びたいカウントダウン今はただひたすら練習の日々覚悟と声で立つ夢のステージ
Rise Shirai was properly introduced by Namba at TJPW's May 16th event and will be spending the next month as Namba's apprentice, carrying hosting and in-ring announcement responsibilities until Namba's graduation on June 22nd. What can I say about Sayuri Namba other than he is one of one? The absolute GOAT of pro wrestling announcers. I'm pretty sure I was screaming about this recently. S tier with the bullet. She's the GOAT of this shit. The GOAT! Alright? Don't ever in your motherfucking light dim Sayuri Namba's light for nobody. If someone says, oh, hey, who's your favorite ring announcer? And they say, like, Justin Roberts, slap him in the face. And if they say, oh, I like Howard Finkel, slap him in the face. There's only one GOAT of this shit. Only one who does it like Sayuri Namba. Let me tell you something, brother. There's really no one else like Namba when it comes to connecting with the audience and becoming integral to the dynamics of the show. She's an active participant in the atmosphere of TJPW, whether it's the dramatic intensity of her calls, guiding fans on how to clap and cheer along to everyone's entrance themes, down to the way she's always waving and acknowledging the fans online. You'd think this kind of stuff would be obvious in a role like this, but these are just a few examples of how Namba's presence in the promotion goes beyond just simple ring announcing. Listen, you can replace any other ring announcer in any other pro wrestling company on the planet and no one would bat an eye. Life would move on. But Namba? These are some pretty big shoes to fill. And all that said, I'm confident that TJPW management understand the significance of Namba's contributions, and the selection of Rise Shirai as the new announcer was made in confidence. I'm looking forward to seeing her work and watching her become a part of TJPW. I wish Sayuri Namba all the best in her new life that she's putting together in her big move to Canada. In far less traumatizing news, TJPW got a new website. Not only is it better organized and nicer to look at, but it's also got an updated schedule page, complete with a calendar, making it even easier to figure out when TJPW is airing on Wrestle Universe. It's also got a much easier URL to remember, tjpw.jp. I've recently started relying on this page a lot more when it comes to upcoming events, as it's a lot quicker to get the information here as opposed to the Wrestle Universe app. Check it out. TJPW's in-house idol group, UPUP GIRLS Kako Pro Wrestling, has a new single available now on most streaming services, and y'all, these girls do not miss. Debuted at the January 4th show at Korakuen Hall, Stand Up Proof of Love has already become a staple song for the UPUP GIRLS Concert Corner, and rightfully so. This one slaps. Definitely my favorite song of theirs since Babyface. One aspect of this new song that makes it all the more special are the lyrics, which were written by Hyper Misao, who also makes a guest appearance in the music video. Misao low-key might actually be the most talented person in pro wrestling right now. There is nothing this woman can't do. So be sure to show some love for your favorite idol girls and stream Stand Up today. Our last major update of the day is one that I'm both very happy about and hoping that I'm not the cause of, but Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling is now on Bluesky. You can find them at TJPW 2013 at bsky.social, and they've been providing English language reposts of content found over on its Japanese Twitter account. I'd mentioned in the beginner's guide video that fans will still want to utilize Twitter in order to get all the relevant TJPW news they need, and while you'll still want to take a peek over at the bad place to get on-the-spot translations and other small details, having an official TJPW presence on Bluesky is very much appreciated. Yeah, and I just hope that this isn't my fault somehow because, you know, Bluesky isn't exactly lighting the internet on fire right now, and so this is creating extra work for TJPW staff somewhere, but also, get on Bluesky, y'all. It's super chill, there's no algorithm shoving rage bait in your face, and the Nazis know that they're not welcome there. What are you waiting for? Alright, with all those updates out of the way, let's get to those questions. Some of these I pulled directly from the comment section of the Beginner's Guide video, and others came from a request for TJPW and Japanese-related questions over on Bluesky. Thanks so much to everyone who reached out. Alright, our first question comes to us from Dungunman8360, who writes, "From what I've heard and seen, TJPW feels like if someone mixed 90s era AJW with Chikara and CMLL and filled it with cute girls." I mean, you're not wrong. They go on to ask, where do I start watching first? Yeah, so this was a common question I got after the video went live, especially over on our Discord. If you want to hop into TJPW and catch up as quickly as possible, I'd recommend starting back at the 2024 Tokyo Princess Cup and following those tournament shows up until Wrestle Princess 5. This way you'll get to see the entirety of the roster, jump straight in with a very straightforward storyline, and see the differences between the A, B, and C tier shows. From there, you could just watch all the title shows up until present day. I'll have a full playlist of shows to watch on Wrestle Universe on the screen for you to check out, and if all of this feels like too much homework and you just want to dive in straight away, I'd recommend going back to their latest major A-tier event, which at this moment would be March's Grand Princess 2-5, and then just watch the title shows from March to present day. Next, we got a pair of questions from one of the kindest people on Raku's internet, Pat Bear. Be sure to follow them on Twitch and Bluesky. They commented on the original video to ask, could you create a follow-up video for regular outside guests? So this was actually a part of my original script for the video. I absolutely intended to feature the regular guests that TJPW likes to bring in for matches, but when I looked at it all together, it just didn't feel like a section that belonged, so I set it aside. That said, here's the current crop of outside guests currently making TJPW a home away from home, starting with the Japanese freelancers. Ryo Mizunami, aka Anaki, the perennial freelancer, serves as one as TJPW's final bosses and always brings the house party wherever she goes. Just check out the number of promotions she works for in an average year. It's completely insane. Yuna Manase is a former TJPW roster member turned freelance icon. Yuna is also a prolific trainer among Joshi wrestlers, having trained Nao Kakuta, Sayuri Ano, Natsupoi, and Tam Nakano, among others. Ram Kai-Cho, the demon-possessed chairwoman of the Tokyo Underground. Ram debuted at, I shit you not, like 7 years old for the 666 promotion, where she'd wrestle adults with her supernatural powers. She'd take a decade-long hiatus to, graduate school, before returning to wrestling as a freelancer in 2019. And in 2023, she married her favorite UPUP girl, Raku. Aisha Kong, an absolute legend from the 90s Joshi boom period. Aija is the ultimate final boss of Tokyo Joshi Pro, and rightfully so, remains undefeated in singles competition within the promotion. He is also quite fond of Raku, I must say. Kakeru Sekiguchi is another prominent freelancer within Japan, and is mostly in Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling due to her uncanny likeness to Mihiro Kiryu. How about that? Next are the wrestlers regularly making appearances from Southeast Asia, starting with Thailand's first women's wrestler, Matcha. What's funny is I constantly find people who don't know who Matcha is, but then I'll say, oh, you know that wrestling artist on Twitter, Topla? Oh yeah, I know Topla. Yeah, dude, that's Matcha. She's one of the final students trained by Emi Sakura and is the pride of her homeland promotion, Set Up Thailand. Alexis Lee is a world-traveled freelancer from Singapore, best known for her iconic skull makeup and desire to indulge in cannibalism. It'd be like that sometime, you know? Nor Phoenix Diana is not only the first hijab-wearing pro wrestler, but is also the first women's wrestling champion of Malaysia. She recently joined TJPW on her first tour alongside the previously mentioned SCA wrestlers, and I'd imagine she'd be back again before too long. Finally, the guests from the West who frequently inhabit TJPW. The non-binary nightmare Max the Impaler can be found haunting the locker rooms of TJPW, but mostly Palms, where they're one half of the most destructive force within the promotion, Palm Paler. The Russian Dynamite Masha Slamovich is a popular freelancer all around the world of pro wrestling, a former TNA Wrestling Knockouts champion, and has a seemingly never-ending rivalry with TJPW's ace, Miyu Yamashita. Zara Zakir is a rookie sensation that TJPW managed to spot less than 100 matches into her career, debuting her in 2024 against Mizuki. Unfortunately, she has since become federally ID'd, if you know you know, so there's no guarantee that she'll be back at this point. Viva Van is the goth baddie representing Vietnam and can usually be found in TJPW mixing it up with Yuki Kamafuku, recently relieving her of the VPW Women's Championship. Jada Stone is a Carolina freelancer who turned a surprise match as a last-minute replacement against Shoko Nakajima at DPW into a full-blown TJPW tour schedule. And overall, you know, she's just making us Southern wrestling fans proud with just how far she's taking her craft. Sticking with Pat, as they also dropped a question for me over on Bluesky, asking a question that I'm sure a lot of foreign fans of Japanese wrestling have had to ask themselves at some point, which is, why do some Joshi promotions still train and hire teenagers? Yeah, so this is a question that comes up a lot among Western fans, especially for those getting into overseas women's promotions for the first time, because it's definitely not something you see in a lot of the US scene. Not to say it doesn't happen, because hey, check out Billy Starks and Nick Wayne being grizzled young veterans before they could even legally step foot in a bar. There are a ton of reasons as to why this is, starting with the most commonly accepted contribution to this practice, which is the history of mandatory retirement ages within the women's wrestling scene of Japan. Throughout the 70s and 80s, when Joshi Pro Wrestling was at its peak popularity, All Japan Women's, or AJW, was essentially the only game in town for women's wrestling in Japan, and they introduced a set retirement age for its talent of 26 years old. So why were women being forced to retire in their prime years when men often wrestle well beyond retirement home age? Well, from AJW's perspective, it's because as the only prominent women's wrestling promotion within Japan at the time, they were inundated with thousands of willing applicants anytime a spot or casting call opened up for new wrestlers. And so, by enforcing a mandatory retirement age, they could cycle out fresh talent the same way a pop idol agency would create ongoing generations of the same musical group. It's almost like these things are intricately connected to one another, you know? But that's closer to AJW's perspective on the matter. But to be frank, mandatory retirement ages for Joshi wrestlers stem from sexism and the enormous societal pressures placed on women within Japanese culture to get married and become full-time mothers by the time they reach 30. So, by setting a retirement age of 26, that would give talent a few years to figure out that whole situationship so they can crank out that kid and disappear from polite society. Meanwhile, men wrestling get to go well until the wheels fall off, and kids don't really factor into their career plans because, hey, that's what women are for. Wow. Antiquated gender roles sure are fascinating. Surely there aren't any long-term lasting ramifications to this. Mandatory retirement ages for Joshi wrestlers stopped being a thing starting around the mid-90s when previously retired wrestlers were starting to make comebacks, and women's wrestlers themselves started making their own promotions where they could set their own rules and without any set age limitations. However, the lasting effects of such retirement ages is women's wrestling not being seen as a particularly viable or long-lasting career. And I mean, sure, that's pro wrestling in general, but there's still a general notion within the Japanese scene that, for women in particular, wrestling is something you should only do while you're young. And so if you're looking to have a career in pro wrestling and you can't tack on years to the end, you can start as young as possible to maximize the number of years available to you. This is also why you see a lot more younger women in entertainment within Japanese culture in general. The pressure to maximize one's footloose and fancy-free years before you gotta lock in and squeeze that kid out. So that's a little bit about the cultural and societal reasons why you tend to see more teenagers in Japanese wrestling, more so than in other regions, but it goes well beyond this. As is the case all around the world, kids in Japan are often encouraged to participate in youth sports, whether it's part of a school program or an extracurricular hobby. When it comes to girls in Japan, gymnastics is a popular choice, as are martial arts such as judo and aikido. And what is pro wrestling if not the center of this athletic Venn diagram? And if you're a kid looking to get into pro wrestling, there are classes and dojos readily available to take you and even your grandma on if you'd like. For example, Emi Sakura's Darajo class is a weekly women's wrestling class that teaches the basics of pro wrestling in a minimal impact atmosphere intended for ages 6 to 60. It's mostly intended as a self-improvement and motivational gymnastics class, with its goal being to allow all women a chance to experience pro wrestling for themselves and without the pressures of applying to a dojo system or having to get into peak condition just to try throwing a dropkick. Another example would be Heat Up Dojo, which offers a more traditional pro wrestling training experience for all ages and genders in a much more relaxed and casual atmosphere than your traditional pro wrestling dojo. These are just two examples of how pro wrestling could become an after-school sport for kids in Japan, even if they don't fully intend to try and make a career out of it. It's just something that's more readily available and that you can pick up and do over there. And having looked into it more, I think this is a fairly underrated aspect of the equation because here in the United States, most wrestling schools won't even touch you if you're not 18, 17 if you're lucky. This can be due to differences between state and federal laws, the complex nature of both health and incidental business insurances, pro wrestling not being seen as a legitimate form of athletic pursuit. There's a number of contributing factors here, but needless to say, being a youth with a dream of being a pro wrestler in the US usually means you're either backyarding it with your friends, being trained under the table, or just having to wait until you're old enough to begin properly. There's also an argument to be made that some of this is just about representation. One of the most powerful hooks for any potential new wrestling fan is being able to see themselves in the people within the ring. And kids are definitely more open to this line of thinking. Throughout the boom periods of the 70s and 80s, the primary audience for Joshi wrestling was school-age girls and teenagers. However, this flipped almost entirely going into the 90s as the arenas filled with teen girls screaming their hearts out for crush gals were replaced with mostly older and teenage men. And it never really flipped back. TJPW crowds are still mostly older dudes, as that's just what the pro wrestling audience has become. Utilizing teenage talent such as Haru Kazushiro and Uda Takami is a promotion's way of trying to appeal more to the youth and hook younger fans. And if you're a middle schooler watching someone just a few years older than you break out a springboard dropkick and toss around full-grown adults, that could be some life-altering shit, you know? And this brings us to our final point. It's because they can. As far as I'm aware, Japanese child labor laws dictate that the minimum age for employment is 15 years old, with exceptions, however, for the film, television, and theatrical performance industries, which is exactly what pro wrestling falls under. And with parental consent, you get Haru and Runa Okubo debuting for TJPW before they've even done their high school exams. And of course, these are just two recent examples. We've seen the likes of Ram Kai Chao and Riho debut in the single digits of their lives. And at the end of the day, a lot of the responsibilities fall on the promoters themselves, and so there's a lot of work that goes into ensuring that any underage in-ring participation is performed as safely as possible. And on a final note, I've mostly been talking about the differences between the Japan and US scenes here, but I also want to point out that it's not just Japan where you see pro wrestling talent debuting in their teenage years, as it's also more common in the UK and Mexico scenes. Rey Mysterio famously debuted at only 14 years old. So in this sense, I don't want to say that it's a uniquely American issue, but there's certainly a lot more mitigating circumstances as to why it's just not a thing that you see happening over here. Sticking with the teenagers, but a far less complicated question, Red Sox fan 846 asked, why is Runa Okubo on hiatus? Yeah, so I mentioned this at the very end of the beginner's guide video while introducing Toga, as she debuted in the same rookie class alongside the high schoolers Haru and Runa in 2023. And hey, thanks for staying to the end of the video. You, my friend, are a real one. In October 2024, it was announced that Runa Okubo would be taking an indefinite hiatus from Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling to focus on her schooling. She admitted that she was having problems juggling the life of a pro wrestler and a high schooler, and that she'd be taking a break until she finishes. Her final match for TJPW was October 27th against the idol that inspired her to become a pro wrestler in the first place, Yuki Kamifuku. I was a big fan of Runa's while she was on the roster, so hopefully it's not goodbye, but just see you next time. Stay in school, kiddos. Our next question comes from, well, actually a bunch of y'all who asked, will you be creating any similar beginner's guide videos for other promotions? And while I'd love to jump at the idea and say, yes, of course, but the truth is, I'm not really sure I could do it for another promotion without pouring a ton of energy into proper research, because y'all gotta understand, when I went into the beginner's guide video to TJPW, I went into it already knowing like 90% of what went into it. So most of the work was just gathering the assets along with some light fact checking. And the 10% I didn't know was some of the minutia of who won which titles and when it happened. But since I already had so much firsthand knowledge, not only from being a dedicated fan, but also having to walk so many other friends both on and offline through getting into TJPW, putting the actual video and the script and everything together just kind of felt like formalizing an already established process of mine. If I were to try and do a similar video on, say, Stardom with anywhere near the amount of precise confidence as I did with TJPW, that would probably take me months of research, as I'd have to consult and lean on some more friends to achieve similar results. Because while I do watch and adore Stardom, I'm also nowhere near as locked in on it as I am with TJ, or really any other promotion. Like, TJ is number one for me. I think the only other promotion I could make a similar video for would be All Elite Wrestling, and there's actually probably a lot of value to be found in something like that. But I also think about how absurdly huge that roster is and how it's always changing, and it starts sounding a lot more daunting than the TJPW video for sure. So all that to say, I'm not ruling this type of stuff out, but it's really the difference between making something with pure passion versus still needing to educate myself before I can properly convey that passion. And you got to go with the pure stuff whenever you can, you know? I do, weirdly enough, really enjoy making pro wrestling themed tutorials though, because some of them sound silly when I pitch them to myself. Like, what do you mean you need a Wrestle Universe guide? You sign up to it. You type in Wrestle Universe, you give them your credit card, that's it, you sign up. But there are so many fans who don't even know that, for one, the service even exists in the first place. And even when they do find out, the initial language barrier can be daunting. And even if the service provides options for English language speaking, it might not be so obvious to start. We also live in an age now where some people just really need to be shown how to do something, no matter how simple it is, if only to trigger the part of the brain that says, oh yeah, I can do this. I can figure this out. And sometimes just that is the value of making the thing. I have an upcoming tutorial video planned that when y'all see the title for it, you're probably gonna laugh and say, what kind of weirdo needs a tutorial on this? Like, what kind of freak out there doesn't know how to do this? And let me tell you, you will be both shocked and educated by the results. You will be ashamed of your words and deeds. All right, next up, Discord and Twitch chat regular Patrick asks, Kit, who are your favorite TJPW wrestlers? Always a big question, as I do have many favorites, but if I had to narrow it down to my absolute ride or die favorites, first would have to be Mizuki, a phenomenal wrestler and incredible talent, obviously. I love how creative she is and how she's always finding new ways to surprise everyone in ring. I also think she's the only TJPW member who recognizes me. I was fortunate to be able to see her US debut when she took on her trainer, my GOAT, Emi Sakata, in Deadlock Pro Wrestling. And when she returned to DPW the following year, I got to the front of her line and she greeted me by pointing and shouting, "It's you!" I was so shocked. I was not aware that I had made any kind of impression whatsoever. Unfortunately, though, this sweet moment got cut short, as when I went to pay both her and Yuka for their autographs, I peered into my wallet and my money was missing. Oh my gosh, I had most likely just dropped what I had saved for Mizuki while juggling my change from Yamashita's line, and I was just so embarrassed, and all I could think of was, oh my god, I hope she understood that I was also surprised that I had no money where there previously was money and that I'm not just a cheap ass. I was dreading. I was like, oh God, I'm so embarrassed. But don't worry though, because the story does have a happy ending, as I wound up catching her in Philly where we finished the story, having finally paid to have her sign my TJPW jacket. Maki Ito is of course another big favorite of mine, and I have to credit her with getting me into TJPW in the first place. She arrived on my radar at a time when I really thought I was done with pro wrestling and didn't have any love for it anymore. And then I started seeing all these clips and gifs of her antics on Twitter, and I think it was after getting her ass beat by Yamashita, she goes to dap her up, and she's like, ugh! And it's like, oh my God. I just needed to get on this. I needed to know everything about this girl. Unlike Mizuki, however, I have yet to meet Maki because despite having multiple opportunities to do so, I'm pretty sure that I would get to the front of Maki's line and I would just start bawling my eyes out, and she don't need that. Maki's got enough to worry about. Shoko Nakajima and Hyper Misao are two other big favorites of mine. Together, they are fantastic, and I love seeing them as a tag team. Individually, they are both just phenomenal wrestlers in their own right. Shoko is one of the most flat-out underrated pro wrestlers of her generation, walking the earth today, just an absolutely phenomenal worker. There is nothing she can't do, and the fluidity and consistency of her work just constantly leaves me in awe. And Hyper Misao, well, I love a good menace. And there's also just like no one else like her in pro wrestling. One of the most complex, galaxy-brained weirdos in wrestling today. And we'd love to see it. Pom Harajuku, of course. Okay, I don't think there is any one wrestler who puts a smile on my face as much as Pom. I also love the rookies, Haru Kazushiro and the big dog, Uda Takami, aka Big Oots, aka Uda, aka Uda Takamichi Noku, the big dog. But for real, watching Uda and Haru continue to grow and flourish as wrestlers is so cool. One of the most fun aspects of following Teach right now, for sure. And I think that's a lot of the charm of TJPW. The roster is so rich with character and unique qualities that it makes it easy for even newcomers to just jump in and instantly assign themselves a favorite. Fellow TJPW superfan and Moot Tomble asked, is Kaya Torabami the best? And yes, she is. And she's also just a very unique masked wrestler who, despite her lower status on the cards, can still inspire a dedicated fan base. Tomble, of course, is one of the Torabami's strongest soldiers, but they're not alone because there's also local fans overseas who make sure their favorites are getting dedicated paper tape whenever possible. It's a roster that inspires the best of its fans, and it makes it all just so fun to watch and discuss with all the other fans. Oh, and I'd also like to add all the other UPUP girls to my list. Praise Raku. From my fellow co-founder of Crescent Pro Wrestling, Relit the Goddess, they ask, could Wakana Uehara beat BeardMeetsFood in an eating challenge? Yes, absolutely, 100%. I am always backing my girl Wakana! No matter what. And if there is anything in this world that she's better at than pro wrestling, it's pro eating. Where does it all go? Don't know. But once you've seen how fast she can put away a pizza, brother, it changes things. They should totally collab though. Like, Wakana should definitely be trying to out-eat some fellow foodies on her trips overseas. I've already told her about Waffle House, so hopefully she can make that dream come true someday. We gotta know how Wakana likes her hash browns. Finally, from Not Xander from Buffy on Bluesky, they want to know, what are your TJPW dream matches? Yeah, so Daisy Monkey vs. Violence is Forever is at the top of the list. That's why we ran it at Saberism Chapter 1. No one really watched Saberism Chapter 1, but you should, because that match definitely kicked ass. I love Daisy Monkey, and so I'd also love to see them take on a team like Emi Sakura and Masa Takanashi. I need to see them in some sort of Choco Pro adjacent situation, you know? I'd mentioned how Haru Kazushiro is one of my favorites, and I'd love to see her take on the current New Japan Strong and Artist of Stardom champion, Azumi. Azumi is one of my favorites over in Stardom, and I feel like they'd have a lot of chemistry together. I see a lot of early Azumi in the way Haru moves and carries herself in the ring, so I think it'd be a really cool matchup. Now back to tag team wrestling. Tag team wrestling is the best wrestling. This is tag team wrestling propaganda. Doc had asked me if I had any predictions for the Hyper Misao produced Hype 3 event coming on June 27th, and here's a dream match for you. Hiraku Kiyome, Hyper Misao, and Shoka Nakajima versus the best bros, Balyanaki and Saruga. Can you tell I just really want some sort of big TJPW cross Choco Pro show? Hey, here's another one. Let's run Poison Sawada Julie, Shino Suzuki, and the big dog, Uda Takami versus the team of Hyper Misao, Miyu Watanabe, and Raku. Oh no! Somehow Poison Sawada Julie has returned and used his dark powers of snake magic to control the hearts of the UPUP girls Shino Suzuki and Uda Takami. Realizing the true gravity of the situation, the remaining UPUP girls, Miyu Watanabe and Raku, call upon the protector of love and peace within Tokyo Joshi Pro, Hyper Misao, the only hero cunning enough to defeat the evil serpent wizard, and also available for early afternoon weekend bookings. God damn! Give me the book already, Coda! Hey everyone, thanks so much for making it to the end of the video. You, my friend, are a real one. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more, please let me know and we can make this a regular series of TJPW news and updates. It's a pretty mellow promotion, so I think we'd really only have to do it like 2 to 3 times per year. Alright, thanks again everyone, and I'll see you in Texas.